Hi, I'm Lisa Gonzales, Chief Business Officer here at Mt Diablo Unified. In this episode of Ask the CBO, we're going to take a look at COLA. There's going to be a lot of talk about COLA, especially with the governor's May revisions that have just come out, and want to make sure that we're explaining this in a way so you can see some examples of how it would impact us here in Mt Diablo Unified. So to start with, COLA, not something you drink, it's cost of living adjustment. And it's an adjustment that's made every year. The statutory COLA is a term that we frequently use, and it talks about the COLA that comes down from the state of California. It's a number that comes from federal figures. It takes a look at the changes in the costs of doing business and a number of other things, but really it takes a look at it from the state and the local government consumptions with regards to expenditures that are happening across the nation. And it's also aggregated at the national level. So what does it do? It is really intended to measure, again, those costs that I mentioned of doing business. And it's something that the national government takes a look at. And these are words that are straight out of Ed Code, which is why they're pretty technical here. But the challenge that we have in California is that when you see COLA, you don't necessarily see it adjusted for California. And as you all well know, the cost of living in California, especially here in the Silicon Valley, is certainly much, much higher than it is in most other areas of the nation. So that's a little bit about it. It doesn't automatically result in new money, and not new money the way that we always intend. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that. But what it does do is it increases the funding per unit of measure. What does that mean? A unit of measure for us is a student that comes to school and you have what we call butts and seats. Every day that a student is at school or a student is on approved independent study with work that's been turned in, we get revenue, we get money for that day for that student. And so one way to take a look at it is it's growth funding. It adds a little more to what we get per student for every day that those students are in class. So it's intended to cover the cost of doing business, which for us it's the cost of staffing, it's the increases to instructional materials, it's utilities, it's the retirement components that we pay for, PERS, the Public Employee Retirement System, STRS, the State Employee Retirement System, or the State Teachers Retirement System, excuse me. And the challenge that we're starting to run into with COLA is that we are experiencing inflation that is at a 40-year high. And that will be some of the slides I share in an upcoming presentation. But COLA doesn't go as far as we would like it to go. So let's take a look. Just move myself here. Let's take a look at the COLA and its impact. So what you see here is you see grade spans in the far left. We are funded based on spans of students. And so what you see in the column there that says 2021, 22, that's the first arrow. We get funding. If a student is in the third grade, you can see the funding is a base amount of $8,093. And you can see that it gradually goes higher. Why is that? Because the assumption is, and the calculation is, that as students move up, the cost of the programs they participate in, especially when you get to the high school level with a lot of career technical education programs and a lot more lab classes, the expectation is that students and the services cost more. This year, we are expecting a 6.56% statutory COLA, which means that the arrow that you see there, you multiply that by 6.56%, and you can see how much more per student in certain groups we would receive next year. So when you take the base and you increase the COLA, you can see how the base amount per student in certain grade span groups increases. Now, let's take a look at this one. We're going to go super simplistic. We're going to assume that we have 100 kindergartners, and we're going to look at the price differential between, or the cost differential, or the revenue differential between this current school year and next year. This year, every single one of 100 students would be $8,093. So you multiply the funding ADA by the 100 students, and we would receive $809,300. That's this year. However, next year, let's assume that 5 of those students don't come back. The funding increases based on the COLA, but we're only getting that funding for 95 students, which means that the difference that we get is about $10,000. You can see that from right here to right here. If all of the students had come back, this is the amount that we would have expected to receive. So it would have gone from this amount here to this amount here. But when 5 students don't return, it's a loss for us of about $43,000. So let's play that out large scale for Mt Diablo Unified for next year. We've been in declining enrollment for a number of years. We take a look at all sorts of data points. We have a demographer that we work with, Davis Demographics, and they go out and they take a look at housing trends. They take a look at the building in the area. They take a look at what's going on across California and movement. And then we take that information and we look at the number of students that we have at school right now. We roll those students over into next year. And then we do some adjustments because sometimes we know that certain schools may have more transfers. We know that there might be something going on in the community, like a private school that might be opening or closing. And we take all of those factors into account. It takes us about 2 months to come up with enrollment numbers that we feel good about for next year. So here's what I've done. The very top chart right here for 21-22, these are the actual numbers for this year. Our ADA for each of the different grade ranges or the grade spans times the base amount and the approximate amount that we would have expected to receive had everybody been at school. Now, let's go down to this one. Let's assume that we were not in declining enrollment. The exact same number of students would come to school next year that did this year. This is the amount that we would expect to get based on the increased COLA. We'd go from 251 million to 267, almost $268 million. Big jump. However, we are declining enrollment. So what does that mean for us? It means that we're going in and the numbers that you see here, 9401, 6667, 4519, you can see that all of these numbers are lower than what we have this current year. That's because these are the grade ranges where we are seeing that we will have fewer students next year. We multiply all of that by the higher base. That's where the COLA comes into account. This is what we expect to see next year for a base amount. The number I want you to really take a look at is how the declining enrollment impacts our revenue. This number right here would be if the COLA was passed through and all of the students remained. There's about an $8 million differential here. And that's what we want to point out when it comes to COLA, because it's nice to be able to take our budget and take our enrollment and multiply the numbers out. But we always have to factor in what happens with our enrollment. And so this is something, again, that we take a look at. We are super optimistic that our numbers are close, but they're always going to be approximately right and exactly wrong, because you never know when a family is going to move in or move out or whatever may happen. So just wanted to explain this so that you could see that with the COLA for next year, we wouldn't be getting just a straight numerical amount multiplied through. We actually have to adjust, and we have to adjust for declining enrollment. Again, COLA is intended to be the cost of doing business for employers. We are an employer and our costs are going up, but it's not as if everything that we would expect to get in those revenues are going to come in. So with that said, that's the end of this week's Ask the CBO. If you've got any other questions, please go ahead and send them to cbo@mdusd.org. The governor's May revisions did come out, and so starting next week, you can see short segments of other components of exactly what he's proposing and how it would impact us here in Mt Diablo Unified.